Welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. We've got the NIA boys here today, Trung Phan, Jack Butcher and Bilal Zaidi. And we have a very special guest here today, Dan Runcie. Welcome to the show, man.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
We got you, founder of Trapital. Man, look, we reference your newsletter, I'd say like at least once a month, right? And we all have said like it might be one of the best names for a newsletter. So we got to get the story on the name first of all, because it's top class.
Oh, well, I never filed a trademark before that, but once I told people I was thinking that name, they were like, file that, get that done right now. And I'm
you filed a trademark for Trapital?
Yeah.
Oh, you got to, God. Man. Someone gonna be selling some merch with it on there or something.
Yeah, no doubt.
Might be Jack.
Well, Jack's the branding expert. Jack, how good of a name is Trapital?
It's class. You pack a lot in there. And a very few letters. Love it.
Oh, thank you.
Constantly reference it.
Appreciate that.
So we're gonna be talking. Yeah, go on, Trung. You're gonna say something.
I'm just saying, listeners, we're doing the show unplugged right now. You gotta get that newsletter. Subscribe to that newsletter. Straight up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so we just Super Bowl was a couple days ago, so we're going to be breaking down Rihanna's Super Bowl performance. We'll be getting the play-by-play there and talking about kind of like culture and music as it relates to Super Bowl. We're going to be talking about Rock Nation as well, and also the catalog economics, so how the music industry works, how it's evolved with streaming and all that fun stuff. But there's also been some really interesting developments in the last year or so, especially. So yeah, and then we'll wrap it up with the best record company ever. So where should we start off, boys? How was your Super Bowl? How many wings did you consume? How many pints did you get into? What was going on? What was the setup?
Dan, give us as the guest. Tell us what you did.
So I was supposed to go to a friend's party, but then didn't start feeling well. It's one of those things where the kid's in daycare now, so feel like we're getting sick now. I'm not someone that got sick before, so we hung out at home, and it was good though. I mean, it was chill. You know, our daughter, we did get her to watch Rihanna's performance, so that was fun. But yeah, it was chill. I mean, it would have been nice to see the Eagles win, I'll say that, but it was still, Mahomes is just dominant, man. You just got to tip your hat end of the day.
Dan, as the resident Trapital individual here with the know-how, how did that performance rank for you? What would you assign that as a rating? And then what would you rank that in your lifetime performances?
Yeah, it's funny. I asked my wife and I were talking about this, and I give the performance a B. I give the performance a B because I think that if we know what type of performer Rihanna was before this, I think it lined up with that. She's someone that is going to rely a bit more on her vocals, and especially now it's going to be a bit more chill. She's not this, dancing performer the same way that a Beyonce or Bruno Mars are. She's going to find a way to adapt it. And I think putting it from that perspective, it's okay, that's about what I expected. I think the top ones for me are still Prince and Beyonce. I feel like they brought it more than anyone that I can think of. And I also like that one with Bruno Mars too and Coldplay, because I think that they had a nice little mashup there. Those for me are the top ones. So everyone else after that. But then there are other ones too. I mean, I thought that the J.Lo and Shakira one was really well done. I think
that was Miami too, right?
Brought it. Yeah, that one was in Miami. Yeah.
Yeah, that was incredible.
I think those had the best real-time memes of so the ones that recently, so actually, Bilal, I can't even access. I'm using his laptop. I can't even access the meme on my camera.
Okay, go.
If you want to throw it on in a second,
yeah.
I remember, obviously, a guy like myself and a lot of other people, I think, on Twitter are just waiting for the meme templates to pop, right? The ones that recently were the funniest to me was The Weeknd when they realized that the entire show was about cocaine. And it's it had a picture of The Weeknd. It's imagine you're a cocoa leaf in Colombia. This is the last thing you ever see. It's The Weeknd's face. And then the last thing I'll say about the performance was that, Dan, you had mentioned that Coldplay and Bruno Mars was so cool when you had the collab, right? The entire time, when I realized that she was pregnant, I'm oh, they're going to bring someone else on. So when work came on, I'm where's Drake? Where's Drake? Where's Drake? And then when all the lights came on, I was just no.
Oh, yeah.
They're not.
I was they can't do it. They can't do it. Yeah.
And
then I thought Jay-Z would pop out. But yeah, I was going to ask, because compared to last year's performance with Dre, and when I first saw Rihanna, I just thought, oh, wow, she's going to have so many hits back to back to back. But then also she's featured like so many amazing artists. I thought they were just going to do that. And by watching it the second time in the morning, I was like, actually, it's cool that she just did her own thing. And she's confirmed pregnant. At the time, I remember everyone's like, is she pregnant? And like, you kind of almost felt bad for asking because she just had a kid. And you're like, oh, maybe she's just coming off like the first pregnancy. But man, like, could you imagine Jay-Z turned up and like all these different people would have been amazing. But it was kind of cool that she just like rocked it out herself. Trung, this is the meme, I think. Yeah, the one I shared in chat. Here we go. Yeah. Here's the meme of the week. Here's the template for you boys. There we go. So
there it is, right?
It's incredible.
For the listeners, her on stage was incredible. She's like 50. Well, this is the thing that blew my mind. She's pregnant. Like looking back, I'm like, this is extremely not safe. I mean, she'd obviously rehearsed it, but yeah, there it is. Super Smash Brothers, greatest game ever. You guys ever play Super Smash Brothers?
Yeah,
of course, man. Classic.
It's a classic. It's a great meme. But yeah, those were my thoughts. What about you, Jack?
Her catalog of music is just insane. Like I don't know how long each 30 seconds, 45 seconds of each track, but just epic career of music, and like still had some left over at the end of that. So that's basically I left with thinking like weirdly underrated. Obviously she's massive. Nobody doesn't know who Rihanna is, but I was like kind of blown away with how many of those tracks that she's made in a career of 15 years, something like that.
Yeah, she could have done 12 other songs and still had a good performance.
Unbelievable. And it's like
I was waiting for Pond to replay, man. That's my favorite. That's the classic throwback.
Yeah, exactly. There's like loads of milestones in my life that like Rihanna's career basically mapped to my like.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Starting to go places and listen to music all the way through to now. It was cool.
Yeah, it's like MTV watching a movie, like the music videos on TV to like probably your first drink somewhere and then university or whatever. Dan, I saw you wrote about this, and I know it's kind of like well documented by this point, but just to get a quick one on this, because a lot of people assume they get paid a lot of money to do this massive show, but in the last few years there's been a lot of people writing about how they don't get paid at all, and in some cases they're actually spending crazy money. So could you just break that down for us, what actually happens with the Super Bowl?
Yeah, so the artists don't get paid, but what the NFL does is they offer a production budget. And I think it may be around like $6 million, something like that. But you often see the artists then putting more money on top of that to do it. We saw The Weeknd do this, and I'm pretty sure that Dr. Dre had done this himself this year. I'm not sure what Rihanna did, but this has kind of become a bit custom where the artists are like, hey, this is our one time potentially in our career, we're going to have 100 million eyeballs on us, plus all the people looking at this performance afterward. How can I maximize this moment? So it takes everything to that last degree. And I do know that it's become a bit of an interesting debate about whether or not they should be paid or shouldn't be paid. And I do think that in 95% of cases, the whole like getting talent to do things free for exposure is bullshit. But this is the type of situation where no, like even if they paid you some nominal fee, the benefits that you get afterward outweigh everything. And I'm not talking about the streaming numbers, because we always see those articles about how it's like 200, 300% increase. And I already see a few of those for Rihanna, but the real bump is what they do in tour, what they do in their products. And you see, I mean, she promoted her own Fenty product in the middle of the game, and she already had drops for Savage Fenty and Fenty Beauty. So she's going to make more than enough money to the point where I feel that even if the NFL had paid something like, I know that, let's use Coachella as an example. I believe the artists get $4 million per weekend to do that. Even if she had gotten paid $4 million for this, I still think that is, small compared to everything else that comes from it.
She has to be like one of the like most leveraged artists in the world too, right? Like the amount of things that she can direct attention to is crazy versus like, I mean, even The Weeknd tour and music, but doesn't have like $1 billion D2C brand.
Right.
I hadn't seen it, but it's pretty crazy how someone in her position particularly makes like sense to pay to get in front of that many people.
Right.
Well, Dan, can you actually walk through her empire? Because she is like officially a billionaire, right? Like Forbes announced on paper. Like what are these kind of leverage points that Jack kind of alluded to?
Yeah, so the main two brands that she has that she's the co-founder of is Fenty Beauty, which is makeup and cosmetics, and Savage Fenty, which is lingerie. She had other ones that didn't quite work out. Like she had a Fenty house that was under the LVMH. That was supposed to be high-end clothing. That one didn't work out as well. But those other two, those are both brands that are valued at over $1 billion. I think Fenty Beauty especially was breaking records. And the thing is, what both of them did was they focused on inclusivity in areas that didn't historically have it, right? So she launches this makeup line and she has all these shades of makeup and cosmetics, especially for people that are darker shades. So it's something that ties back to her, and obviously her being from the West Indies and quite popular now that they've expanded in Africa too. And then with the lingerie line, she's having so many different wide range of plus sizes and things like that that we just didn't see before. So I think she was really able to lean into that, and it taps into her ethos and what she's interested in. And I forget the exact numbers, but the $1 billion valuation came from, at least it was either like a 30% or a 50% ownership stake in one or both of the brands. I forget how it ended up turning out, but she doesn't own them outright, but she does own a pretty sizable stake. And that's what was used to declare her billionaire status.
I think this is actually a great segue because we mentioned at the top about how Rock Nation has been working with NFL to organize these things. So I guess this is a two-parter. Was the first one is she obviously is Jay-Z's like protege, right? Like that was her mentor musically, but how much has he been helping on the business side? So I'd be curious about that. And the second thing is, what is this Rock Nation kind of Super Bowl NFL relationship? And you've written about it, and I thought that was super insightful. Like, how much has that changed? How do they approach artists and the Super Bowl?
Yeah, so I believe that Jay-Z may ended up becoming an investor in Savage Fenty or one of those. I would need to check specifically, but I do think that he was involved there at least at some point. And I think that they were looking at some other Goldman Sachs investment too. So there's a few companies involved, but I know that he's involved there. But I do think that Fenty Beauty was more so directly between her and with Bernard Arnault at LVMH as a joint venture there.
I calls him the geezer.
Yeah, that comes from one time Jack was like, who's that geezer that runs LVMH or whatever? That was
that really
the line.
Geezer?
Oh man. Yeah. So the thing is though, with this, it's interesting because in 2019, that's when Rock Nation announced that it will now be the official partner for entertainment with the NFL, and it'll help with the halftime show and other things. And there was some controversy at the time because this was still in the few years after the Colin Kaepernick protests and some of the outrage because of that. And a lot of people weren't quite sure, why Jay-Z, someone who seemed like he supported Kaepernick, would do this. But Jay-Z's whole thing was that, I've enacted change and this is how we actually help support things. We, make it more inclusive. And with the halftime show specifically, there were a few changes that I know he wanted to make that made a big difference. And I think he spoke to this as someone that, at least from his own raps, he said that they've asked him to do the halftime show. He has that line in that one song, I said no to the Super Bowl, you need me, I don't need you. So he knew a bit of the process. And what he spoke to was that before Rock Nation got involved, the NFL would have this interview process essentially where they would ask 4 artists at one time, hey, do you want to do the Super Bowl? But he's like, you do this process and you end up making one artist happy. You burn bridges with 3 other artists potentially. And if you do that 3 years in a row, then you have 9 artists that are, pissed off. And there's only so many superstars in the world. So he was like, okay, let's take a step back and do one by one. Hey, do you want to do it? If you don't want to do it, then we go on to the next person. It sounds obvious, but that is one of the changes that they made there. We've also seen themes that the Super Bowls have had. I felt like shows in the past, even this past decade, it always felt like it was a bit of a random combination. Like, I like Missy Elliott, but like, why was she paired with Katy Perry in that Super Bowl? It just like didn't quite make sense with the two of them. So we started to see things where, okay, last year's Super Bowl, you had that West Coast ensemble. That makes sense. In Miami, you have the Latin culture event where you have Bad Bunny, J Balvin, Shakira, J-Lo. Perfect. That makes sense. And although they don't do it necessarily every year, the weekend wasn't necessarily tied to Tampa, or Rihanna didn't have ties to Glendale, Arizona, but it's still cool to see that there's a bit of a rhyme or reason. And I think that we're just starting to see a little bit more representation. I feel like for years in the pre-Rock Nation days, the NFL never would have wanted to have hip hop be the sole, ensemble in that type of way. Like he had to push the NFL hard to make that happen. And then you saw what happened. It was one of the most popular shows that we've had. So I think it's been cool to see. And I'm interested because now I think it just opens the doors where, yes, we all know that someone like Taylor Swift or Ariana Grande could always do the Super Bowl, but maybe we'll see some cool and unique things. Like it's going to be in New Orleans in a couple of years. I mean, I selfishly want to see a Young Money Bowl. Let's get,
We know what Dan wants to see in that New Orleans Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah. So I want to see the Young Money Bowl, man. I want to see Wayne, Nicki, and Drake. Headliners. Let's do this.
God. Can you imagine that?
That would be.
Jesus.
Wait, so actually.
They should start picking the locations based on the artists.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, actually, when you were saying Arizona, I was looking up, I couldn't name you a single artist from Arizona. I actually looked up, I Googled it. Stevie Nicks is from Arizona. That would have been dope. But other than that, there's not much going on in Arizona for music. The New Orleans Bowl. Fuck, man.
Boy, I was gonna ask a quick question from just looping back to what you said earlier about Rihanna specifically. Like, should she have been paid or not? Like, should anyone be paid to do the show? And they get a $6-7 million budget for free production value essentially to put on this super show. And I'm just curious to get your take on this, and Jack probably as well, as he's like kind of resident brand advertising, ex-advertising guy. And just, I guess if you compare it to, all these people are spending $7 million for an ad, right? I think it's 30 seconds for a $7 million slot. And so like in this case, they're basically getting free money to like put on this amazing show. Like, how much do you think that's worth? Like, if you just compared to like a $7 million ad that you're getting for like Blue Moon or whatever it was, like, to me, that's like way more, right? Like, you're getting probably $100 million, like $50 million worth of like buzz, basically. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I saw someone do the math, and it was around like 130 to 150 billion if you assume that every 30 seconds of this broadcast is worth $7 million. Right?
Damn.
So, yeah.
And that's just for the ad,
that's
equivalent.
That's a freaking no-brainer.
That's crazy. But I guess that's also assuming that the Super Bowl ad is fairly priced, though. Like, that's another... what about you, Jack? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think... I don't know. Hard to put a number on it, and also depends on, like... It's worth what you can do with it, and Rihanna's probably the best example of, like... The second order effects of her appearing at the Super Bowl has probably grown her net worth faster than any previous entity on there. Attention is the only currency, boys. That's what we always talk about on here, and that's the best. Like, I'm trying to think of something else that would be up there. Super Bowl halftime show is probably number one spot for somebody in her position. So it would make sense to pay $100 million to do it, probably.
I gotta throw a shout out to MASH, the TV show about the Korean War. I was just looking yesterday at the top TV broadcast.
What an incredible segue, by the way. Sorry, that's Trung is the king of segues. Wow.
The 30 most watched TV broadcasts in America ever. 29 are Super Bowl. 1 is MASH, the finale. That's number hilarious. 9. I'm just looking at MASH like. Incredible work, guys. Just incredible work. It's like 1982.
Shout out Alan Alda and the whole crew.
Yeah. On the infinitesimal chance you're listening, man. Great job. Fantastic work 40 years ago. All right. I didn't have any more. Oh, so the rock stuff. That was just to summarize. Actually, the first point you made about like going in order, it wasn't that obvious to me. Like, I totally get just throwing on a wide net and being like, okay, because if you go in order, it might be 3 months. Somebody might bail. Like, that's a risk reward, right? So somebody might bail like 3 months before the Super Bowl, and then you got your hand and then thumb up your ass. But like the contra being, there's only so many superstars. So that when I read that, I'm like, oh, that actually makes a ton of sense. And then more. Opening the net of who and the type of shows you do. But is there anything like financially that kind of changed with Rock Nation's involvement, or just kind of more of the culture around it?
I haven't seen anything financially change because I do feel like they still put in good money, even in the days where I feel like Beyonce put on some very impressive performances. And she actually is a little bit of a nuance to the who gets paid and who doesn't, because in 2012, I think that's when Pepsi had became the sponsor, and they did it for 10 straight years after that. And Pepsi had did a $50 million sponsorship deal specifically with Beyonce herself. And that was supposed to extend for a couple of years. And then during the run of that, Beyonce performed at the Super Bowl twice. So Beyonce is kind of this outlier where she didn't get paid by the league, but she was already partnered with the sponsor. And I think the sponsor likely had some influence on Beyonce coming at the Super Bowl, not once, but also crashing the Coldplay one 3 years later.
That's a great point. There's some leaning was going on, is what was the insinuation here. Some leaning was happening from the C-suite of Pepsi.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Bilal, I don't know if we had this on the agenda, but how do I guess we do, how do the Roc Nation deals compare to other record deals? I was just curious, like, in what proportion is all of the businesses outside of music for Rihanna relative to what she earns from her music career? Do you know?
I would bet that it's a pretty small percentage from what she earns from music, I would say, at this point, especially just because she hasn't released new music really in 7 years at this point. I know she did a song for the Black Panther 2 movie that just came out, but that's one song, right? And that song wasn't necessarily even as big as some of the more recent hits she's had. So yeah, I would be surprised if it was more than 10% at this point.
Wow. Yeah, it's like that's another amazing thing, like injecting music back, an artist back into culture way after they've had their like heyday in inverted commas, right? When they were putting out #1 records every couple of months. It'll be I wonder if she has any other music cooking.
Well, I think that's a great segue, actually, for like, what do you think? What would Rihanna's catalog sell for now? And like, you've looked at, obviously, in the past 2 weeks, Justin Bieber sold for I think $250, and then you've been talking about Michael Jackson's estate selling his catalog, half of it for $800 million, something along those lines.
What was it? 800? You said, Trung?
For half. Was that right, Dan?
Yeah, it was like a 50% deal for around like $800 to $900 million is what was being floated around.
Could you talk through like how you even value these deals? Because I thought the Justin Bieber one, you put in so much nuance, which I thought was interesting, right? In hip hop, you said two things about hip hop, which might be butchering, but one thing was essentially you were very bullish on the kind of the shelf life for hip hop. But for a lot of these catalogs, because of how many people and cooks are in the kitchen for each song, writers, producers, like the actual artist may get less than you see for like a Bruce Springsteen or a Bob Dylan, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So catalog valuations are so fascinating because a lot of the ones that we've seen dating back to 3 years ago when this really started to pick up, a lot of them were for these legacy rock and roll acts from the 70s or even from the 60s, right? So Neil Young was one of the first ones, and we saw Dylan too. And why those artist catalogs are valuable beyond just the longevity is that they, in many cases, are the sole singer and the sole songwriter for that. So there aren't multiple hands that have a stake in this or that, like they're the ones that are doing most of it. And just with how things were back then, they were just releasing so many albums all the time that some of them could have like 20 plus albums and you wouldn't necessarily think twice about it, right? And I think what we're seeing now, though, things are a little different because sometimes it's one of these things where you have to read the fine lines, but it doesn't always come out when you see a number. You see a headline number, you're like, oh, well, you may think that, well, Stevie Nicks isn't, any more or less relevant than this person that's a more contemporary pop star like Justin Bieber. But there's a few things. You mentioned one of them with some of these newer artists, especially in pop music and in hip hop. There are so many more collaborators, right? So pop music, everyone goes to, or they try to go to Max Martin, right? And he gets a cut if he's one of the songwriters for this particular song or if he helped put it together. And then similarly in hip hop as well, you have guest features, they're sampling old songs, they're putting that back in. All of those people have a stake. And you look at someone like Bieber, he's worked with some of the best in the game. And I don't think that he writes a lot of his own music himself. So everyone has a stake. So when you're looking at Justin Bieber selling his share, that's after the label takes its cut, and then that's after all of these people take their cut. So that it factors into the number itself. And then another piece of this too is what people essentially try to capture for the decay curve for these songs. We already have a pretty good idea of what a Dylan song or what a Stevie Nicks song will stream in terms of how many streams that it'll get, you know, the next 10 years, just because it's a bit more predictable. But yeah, Justin Bieber has had a bunch of songs that have 1 billion streams and he's done well. You know, he's a native YouTuber that's risen, but how many songs or how many streams are those songs going to get 10 years from now? That's just so much more unpredictable. So that has to be factored into the equation too. So you have all of these things that are built in, and that's on one side that can make, you know, someone like Justin's catalog less relevant. But on the other side, one of the things that benefits him is that he is someone that was huge for a lot of, you know, younger millennials and Gen Z. And those are some of the most active users and growing active users on streaming services in terms of the biggest, you know, users of those services, and even on short form video as well. And if you're looking at where revenue from most of these songs is going to come from, is going to come from those places. So there's some factors that work in favor of today's stars, but there's some that work against them too. So when I hear a number like Justin Bieber's, it isn't that surprising. But there's also a little bit of nuance too, because some of these firms will pay more than other things. I often think about it like a sports analogy, where you think you have an idea what an NBA first round draft pick goes for, and then the Minnesota Timberwolves trade 4 picks for Rudy Gobert, and then you're just like, okay, now I have no idea what this is worth. And you see some of this as well, where some firms pay that amount, and you're like, wait, they paid that for this? And it's tough because you obviously don't have all the details, you can't see all the things, but some people have more resources to maximize things. Others want to sit on catalogs. Others want to try to, you know, maximize it as much as they can. So it's a fascinating business.
I will tell you that Despacito's decay curve is 0, as in it will never decay.
Hey, that's true.
Wait, Dan, is that the right way to talk about decay curve?
That's the hardest money on earth.
Yeah.
There we go.
That is hard. If you want a store value, if you wanted $1 to be worth $1 100 years from now,
That's
put
so
it into
good.
Despacito. Wait, hold on a second. Is that the right way to think about it, though? Is it 0 on the decay curve that it never decays? Is that right? And then like a 50. How does decay curve work? Like, I want to have the right number.
I mean, I mean, that song's decay curve is probably less than, you know, I think a comparable song that came out in 2017. But I mean, but like all of them, there's still going to be like some level where, okay, this song is going to depreciate. This song is going to decline around like 10% per year. We expect, you know, or something like that. Or because it's relatively new, we may expect, you zoom out and it looks a bit like, you know, a long tail curve where so many of the streams happen up front, and then you look past it and it really isn't that many more streams moving forward.
Hardest, I love that, the hardest asset in the world.
Are there like any outliers that you can think of, like track wise, that break the pattern?
Yeah, so there's ones like, I think that seasonal music has a really interesting pattern where a song like Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You, it's almost 30 years at this point, but every holiday season it gets around, let's say 300 million streams, at least from what we see on Spotify around like each year or so. And then you kind of see it go through its spikes and downs. And it's like, okay, on one hand, the song will just naturally become less relevant over time. But on the other hand, as more people listen to Spotify and Mariah Carey continues to make it a meme and lean into it herself, we're going to see that continue to grow. You also see songs have new life in the age of TikTok and memes. Like look at the Fleetwood Mac Dreams, the guy on a skateboard drinking cranberry. That breathes new life into songs, right? And then you just have broader sync things like Kate Bush Running Up That Hill that gets featured in Stranger Things, and we're still hearing that song on the radio, and that was, you know, at least 9 months ago at this point. And then, you know, more historical ones too that are examples of that, like Bohemian Rhapsody getting featured in Wayne's World early 90s, and then that goes on this, you know, spike, and then again 4 years ago or 5 years ago, whenever that Rami Malek movie came out, and then it goes on a whole nother spike too. So yeah, we've seen some interesting things happen where there are some aberrations that can take into effect.
Well, Dan, let me throw this in now. Sorry, go ahead, Jack.
This was going to be tangent. So if you're going to ask a related
Yeah, I was
question.
just going to ask about, it's related to top songs. This is a little bit different. This is top selling singles ever. So this is like a lot of it will be pre-streaming. And exactly to your point, the seasonal number one song is White Christmas by Bing Crosby. Most albums ever sold. But some of this other stuff is, I just let throw out here, love you guys' thoughts. If it can give us any more like predictability on it. It's like Elton John, Candle in the Wind. That's for Princess Diana, right? That's also a very specific event, cultural, the whole world is noticing. And then you have stuff like Rock Around the Clock, I Will Always Love You, Whitney Houston, and then My Heart Will Go On, obviously Celine Dion and Titanic. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the seasonality part of it, and then the super unpredictable parts is like what will just be the most culturally relevant things ever that this song just gets attached to, right? So yeah, right. I don't even know if it's a question, but any thoughts on that?
But yeah, because sometimes I think even meme culture can take its own path with it, right? Who would have guessed that 25 years after Titanic, James Cameron is literally putting out a special or doing some research to determine whether or not both Jack and Rose could have fit on that door. And he went to it because there's clearly appetite for this. This has been an ongoing debate now that has seen a new life in the age of Twitter and people just going back and forth, that he feels like, yeah, there is enough to this. And he like did the research himself. So things like that, you just don't even know like what movies are going to take form on new different things. And obviously Titanic, so many memes, Leo, I'm the king of the world, hands out and everything. So yeah, it's so fascinating because some of this is completely organic, but some of it is the companies actually working the assets. So one of the ones that stuck out to me is Whitney Houston. Their estate did a deal with this company called Primary Wave, which is in the business of acquiring catalogs. But their whole thing is like, no, we're not just a set it and forget it passive income. We want to work this thing like it is part of our it's part of our portfolio. And they felt like there was a missed opportunity. Whitney had died at that point almost like 7 years ago. And they felt like she was kind of getting forgotten about because there wasn't an active estate pushing things. So they start releasing merch. They start getting her to finding some of her unreleased music and doing tracks with that. I don't know if you heard that song where she did that cover of Steve Winwood's Higher Love, and then that became a Kygo track. Like they were actively pushing that, and then they had that movie that came out this December. So there's times when the people that acquire these assets are like, okay, let's work this thing. And sometimes those things work, but in other times, yeah, I don't think anyone necessarily went out of their way to make Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On work, but it's like she's in Vegas every year doing this show and staying, relevant during her residency. This continues to be a meme. So yeah, who knows where that will be 10 years from now, even if there is a decline.
Jack, did you have you were going to say something earlier? Do you remember?
Yeah, I don't know if this could be a rambling tangent, but I was just curious for your take or summary on like how people get traction in the world of music now as opposed to how they used to approach it. You mentioned TikTok before. I'm kind of fascinated with this idea of basically the MVP of music, right? If you can get a track that you can scale on a TikTok, that's like a launch pad for a career. So I'll just be curious for your thoughts.
Yeah. This has been one of the most interesting places where social media and access to everything, distribution has just changed how these industry works. Obviously, before, the gatekeepers had so much influence on what we ended up hearing, who they were able to try to break as new stars. And if you didn't have the target of a record label, then there was no way that you were going to break through. But now, because everyone has these tools to at least do it themselves, even if you want to have that conversation with the record label, they expect you to have some traction. They want to see, okay, how are you promoting yourself on TikTok? How are you growing in terms of streams? What does your fan base look like? Do you have some type of intangible it factor? And at that point too, you don't even necessarily have to go with them. You could try to do certain things yourself, and there's plenty of trade-offs, one way or the other. But I do think that right now, TikTok and more broadly, short form video is the top of the funnel in music. That's where so much discovery right now happens. And if you're not there, a lot of new artists feel that they're stuck. So there's been this ongoing debate about what are the best ways to use TikTok. And I feel like we're kind of getting past the area of everyone trying to do some like viral dance and just thinking about it. Okay, this is a 60-second vertical video. Let me do something unique and just taking that into their own form. And then under short form video, that's where streaming, right? So you hope that if you can get some awareness there, then that can get people to stream your music. There still is a little bit more friction there, but whether it's a free service like YouTube or some of the paid ones like Spotify or the Spotify's paid tier, Apple Music, you can get some traction there. And then at that point, that's when artists hope that they could just get awareness, because we're seeing they're making the real money from the things that are at the bottom of their funnel, which is going on tour, selling merch, or if you're Rihanna, actually having these D2C businesses where you can, leverage that even further. So that's where we've seen things. And I think the biggest flip to how things were and how things are now is that before, artists used to go on tour in order to promote album sales, right? So touring was seen as a loss leader to then try to get more people to buy your album. And now it's flipped. Music listening and discovery and all that is essentially something that, there is some money to be made, but they're doing so much of that for their own exposure, fan building, distribution, almost in the same way that, all of us here may tweet or get awareness for whatever. Mm-hmm. And then they're making the real money when they go out on the road and charging, more money and other things.
What? That's class. The one other follow-up question I had is, how does TikTok have access to basically every piece of music versus, say, like an Instagram? Because I feel like this is their advantage. That's how TikTok scaled so fast. Either they don't have to abide by the DMCA stuff, or they just don't do it. Or I'm just really curious how that works, because
TikTok.
Shrung's a huge advocate for banning TikTok.
I was going to add an addendum to what you were going to say, Jack, as well. Was how does that compare with like YouTube? Because I know YouTube has content ID with music. So if we uploaded a song with this video, it would get flagged automatically, and the record label, whoever owns those rights, can choose to monetize it and earn money from the video. So I'm just curious how that works with TikTok as well.
Yeah, so I think at least right now, all of the major record labels, or at least Universal Music Group, does have extended agreements with TikTok and the other short form video platforms to be able to play the music. So I think that TikTok, in a lot of ways, I'm sure you've all talked about it here before, but that For You page was just like the generator to just, go have things take off. And we've seen so many times where so many of these social media platforms, it's having some type of music integration that allows them to take off. The thing is, there's been a lot of frustration in the music industry about artists and the rights holders themselves, being the record labels and the publishing companies, getting compensated fairly for that. So there is money coming in. I think the record labels wish that it was less. The streaming services probably wish, or the record labels wish that it was more money coming in. The streaming or the short form video platforms like TikTok probably wish it was less money coming in, but it's an extension of the same debates that we see with streaming right now. I think the music industry is understanding that, yes, these are the places where your music gets discovered. These are the places that people are consuming your music, and they wish that there was more of that money going to the artist, but these platforms have their own incentives too. So it's been an ongoing tug of war there.
Nice.
Love it.
Jack, did you have any follow-up on that before we move on?
No, I guess, no, Mike, maybe I'm wrong in that, like, when I try and do it on Instagram, I get like no results for songs that I'm looking for. But on TikTok, there's like 40 versions of the same song. So whether the way they've built it is like, it feels like I'm getting filtered by some thing when I'm doing it on Instagram, versus TikTok is just like you're searching through every iteration of this song that's been remixed 1,000 times.
TikTok had its own rules, basically.
That's my theory of why TikTok grew so fast too.
Interesting. Right. Yeah, I'll have to dig into that. Yeah.
Also, Dan, I was just going to ask really quickly, because it relates to the TikTok piece there. Like you mentioned, like we went through that era, I'd say probably like more like 5 years ago, where people were just making songs clearly to go viral. Like Drake did one where it was very memeable, and I forgot what song it was, but someone in the comments last week mentioned what it was, and so, but we went from that area where like TikTok originally was people like dancing and doing these funny things, but nowadays it's like way more than that, obviously, content wise. But then I've seen, even just from my kind of like N of one experience on there, like you'll see these songs go viral and they're kind of leaning into like creating a snippet that is really easy to stitch, like those trending sounds, like those noises, those things where people can like use that same sound for something that isn't even related to music, but it becomes kind of like a meme or a trend. And like the one, there's only two I can think of, which I don't know the best examples, but Central C from the UK, he had that song, and it's, you know, a bit of a controversial first line, and that one like obviously works very well on the internet because controversy kind of works on the internet. And then the second one is a very niche one, which I can't remember if I sent to Jack, but it's a Bengali British guy from the UK, and he has a song called the line is something like, I put my Asian ting in a lenga and now she looks 10 times lenga. Lenga is like, it looks like a sari, basically. It's just a wordplay, and leng is like good looking or whatever in this case. So, and then you got all these like Indian Desi girls or Pakistanis, you know, doing this thing where they flip from just wearing normal clothes and then wearing the lenga. And that was like completely different to, I'm sure he might have thought about that when he made the music in the first place, but like, what do you think of stuff like that as we evolve now? Because do you think more artists will just create stuff specifically trying to engineer that sort of trend there?
I think so, because one of the things that we see is that artists want their fans to be able to help recreate and meme and put their own versions out of stuff. So there's this whole discussion right now between artist-generated content versus user-generated content. The record labels want a bit of both, but they're like, you have to do the things yourself as the artist, put it out there, people can see, and then hopefully your fans and others will catch on. So we've seen, and there's been studies that have like recorded this, and I do think that in a lot of ways is the secret aspect to it. You've seen some things that are obvious, like you may be referring to Drake. He had that song Tootsie Slide that was like right at the beginning of the pandemic.
That was exactly, exactly.
Yeah, you could tell that this was literally made for TikTok, but it worked and it went to the top of the charts. I don't think that song probably has a horrible decay curve, for being honest, because the pandemic's over. But I do think that in the moment it worked. But I do think that we've seen artists and their teams that have just worked and put so much effort into it. Like Lizzo is an artist that historically has always done really well with TikTok. She is a performer that is always doing different dances and stuff. And I think that worked for her, especially with her song About Damn Time, to be able to blow up. And we've seen similar with SZA most recently, her song Kill Bill off the SOS album. Same thing here. Like there's things going in tandem, and the hope is that if you do enough, then it'll take off. It almost brings you back to the MTV days where artists at that time and the record labels were like, hey, this is our main distribution platform that is helping us reach this culture of music fans. What do we do to tailor ourselves to it? And you could get a sense for that in how music videos are being made. It was almost like the main point that this person's trying to do is to get on TRL or to be able to do these things. Like that's the vibe that you got. And I think that has always been consistent to some extent. People have always adapted music to whatever the medium is. But I think now with TikTok as the next thing 30 years later, we're seeing that too.
Yeah, awesome. Trung, you got a question there?
No, I know we only have 10 minutes with Dan, so I actually wanted to put him through some rapid fire before we ask him what the greatest record label of all time is. So, Dan, can I hit you some quick rapid fire?
Let's do it.
What's the best concert you've ever been to?
Best concert I ever been to. I know people don't like talking about this guy as much anymore, but I went to Kanye West's Glow in the Dark tour in 2008. Ooh. It was amazing. Incredible. Him, Lupe Fiasco, Rihanna, NERD, Chris Brown showed up. It was great. This was like right after graduation.
This one time, Jesus Christ, incredible.
It was amazing. Yeah.
I did watch The Throne with Jay-Z, Kanye, and it doesn't sound nearly as good as this, but that was amazing. A favorite album.
I mean, I'm a really big, this is a more recent one, but I think that Frank Ocean knocked it out of the park with Blonde. That album is amazing. So good. Amazing.
I love that. This is we'll do, if you were to invest in someone's catalog, but you're looking for return. So you got to make it like getting in early kind of here. So you're an investor, you're Dan Runcie, Trapital investor, which you kind of already are already, but now you're putting your money into someone's catalog, but you're trying to maximize return. Who's that going to be?
Ooh, if I want to maximize my return on someone's catalog right now, I will invest myself in the Taylor Swift Taylor's version. All of those songs. Give me all of them.
Game over. No decay curve there either.
And then
All
even
right,
more so, she still has like 3 albums left to re-record. I'm all in.
You're all in. All right,
But
one
Dan,
more.
can I
Go
add
ahead.
one real quick? It's related. What's your favorite hip hop album of all time? Like you mentioned Frank Ocean, incredible album, but like hip hop, I know that's like we could be here all day talking about that one, but curious if one comes to mind.
Oh yeah, so the ones I'll always go back to. So I think Kanye's "My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy," amazing.
Incredible.
I think it's one of the best ones you've seen. Jay-Z's "Blueprint" also really good. 50 Cent "Get Rich or Die Trying." I mean, that one probably has like sentimental value just because of like how big it was in that point too. Yeah.
Yo, when Wangster dropped, my
boy.
Man.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, that's so good.
I remember when Wangster came out, I'm like, who is this guy? That's an amazing question. Thanks for dropping that below. I'll do this before we do the great best record. If
Tron,
somebody
your
had to read
internet
one of
was
your Trapital
cutting off
articles, what
slightly.
will it be? Oh,
Could
wait,
you say
can
that
hear me
again?
now?
Because yeah. Was
saying-
that cutting off for you guys as well?
A little bit.
Just say that question again.
All
We'll
right,
cut
the question
that.
is, Dan, for everybody listening, they're going to have to read one Trapital article. What is the canonical go-to article?
Oh, so I would actually say the report that we put out in the fall of last year. So we released this report called the Culture Report. This is our first semi-annual breakdown on the most important trends that are happening. So we talk about catalog sales. We talk about how artists become millionaires by selling music, but they become billionaires by selling product. We talk about some of trends happening in streaming and how things have shifted over time. We talk about Future selling his catalog, where we are right now with NFTs and Web3. We're going to be releasing these twice a year, but that one is still on the homepage, trapital.co. So check that one out, the Culture Report.
And we'll link to that in the show notes below as well, so you can just click straight there and make sure you're signed up for that. We've got 5 minutes left. Where do we want to? We got 5 minutes with Dan.
Listen, we've been teasing it. So Dan recently did a podcast about a Def Jam versus Cash Money Records, which was to decide who was the best record label ever. So the one quote I'll say from that, which I love, is like, if Warren Buffett was a value investor, which he is, and he was investing in one of his labels, he'd do Cash Money, because how much they were able to squeeze the value out of a solid investment.
That's such a great like
how amazing is that, right? Like, this is why Capital's the best. It's like the frame. But so Dan, super quickly, is how Def Jam versus Cash Money. Why did you pick those two as potentially the greatest record labels ever? And what criteria are you using? And then where did you kind of end up?
Yeah, so first, shout out to my friend Zach O'Malley Greenberg, because he was the one that made the Warren Buffett analogy, which I love, which I've repeated since then. But yeah, so he brought that one in here. But for me, it was 2 things. So we did this episode that was a breakdown on Cash Money. It was very much, okay, let's go back. What made this one unique and everything else? And the question at the top was, what's the best record label ever? And we still said that Def Jam was the best hip hop record label ever, just considering the longevity. There's so many eras that you could go back to. And I know that the past 10 years or so maybe haven't been as noteworthy, but you go back to the 80s with like LL Cool J, Beastie Boys, everything that they were able to do then. Then you go to the 90s and they just became so synonymous with hip hop, whether you had Jay-Z, DMX, Method Man, and so many other folks that were involved with the label as well. You go into the early 2000s, partnerships they had with Ja Rule as well, with everything they did with Murder Inc., and then more broadly with Rockefeller Records. And even more recently, of course, that's where Rihanna was signed. They had Jeezy, they had Kanye as well for so many years. So many of these bigger albums we're talking about, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is a Def Jam album. So I think it has to be them. But I think the unique thing, and this is where Cash Money does stand out, if we're talking about businesses, like a company that you'd actually want to be able to invest in, I do think that Cash Money stands stronger there because it's an independent company. It's an independent company that has a distribution deal, which means that, they're the ones that retain, but for 15-20% they are offering their music to then be distributed by Universal Music Group. So the Cash Money still retains so much of that, as opposed to Def Jam was acquired by the major record labels in the late 90s. So it's a different thing there, where one, you're comparing an independent company versus the one that's under the umbrella. But in terms of the Warren Buffett line, there was this whole era where people just started spending so much money on music videos and high quality producers or more well-known producers and stuff. And Cash Money just really didn't do any of that stuff. I mean, there were so many times where hip hop artists were wearing flashier suits. You had Hype Williams music videos with the fish lens and all this stuff that worked well on MTV. But Cash Money is just like, no, we know what we're doing. This Southern music thing is our thing. And their records did in many ways just as good, and they were able to do more or less. They were able to still retain ownership after all these years. And now they have a business that generates $20 to $30 million a year just from the masters from all these artists. You're including, Juvenile, Lil Wayne, Drake, Nicki, and so many others. And they really don't have to do as much. It is kind of a cash cow at this point. Granted, I think they could do much more, channeling back to the other part of the conversation we had, but I do think that there's something to be said there. So the better company, I'd say Cash Money, although there's plenty of issues about them not paying artists fairly. But in terms of the hip hop influence, has to be Def Jam.
Man,
We're going to be all right if we put Drake
guys.
on every hook.
Yes, sir.
That's true. That's true.
Wait, Dan, I just had one comment from you mentioning the music video. I think it was from either you or Zach said it was such a great line. It's like, I think the jacket that Diddy wore in like more money, more problems costed more like the entire video for like Cash Money, like the bling bling video, right?
That's hilarious.
Oh yeah. Like that more money. Yeah, that would have costed more than anything from like Juvenile back that ass up. 100%.
Incredible. Well, amazing, Dan. Thanks again for coming on, man. I know we're hitting time. That was super
amazing.
cool. Yeah, we could do this. We definitely got to have you again because I feel like we got another 7 topics we could talk through another time. But yeah, appreciate you coming on. Jack and Trung, anything else before we say bye to Dan?
No, just
we definitely got a few more episodes to
would
do.
love
That was
to
great.
have you back on, man. That was amazing. Thank you.
Definitely. Let's do it, man. This has been an honor. Love what you guys are doing. And yeah, this was fun. Let's do it.
Thank you, Dan.
Appreciate Dan, man. Speak soon. Cheers.
Appreciate you all. Talk soon.
I had one more thing I was going to bring up if we wanted to keep recording for a few minutes. But
Yeah, let's keep recording for a couple seconds. I literally just wanted to talk about Bilal's stanky face every time. Every time
what?
Dan mentioned a sick artist, Bilal was
Yeah, I'm
just
like, oh, yeah. We should just keep this in the pod, by the way. This should just.
I literally saw Bilal when he's like in the 90s when he had DMX, but I was like,
oh, yeah,
that
and then I was DMX, RIP, man, Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
but
rest
anyway,
in peace, man.
By the way, I
I
went to
Go on.
DMX's last ever concert, boys, by chance.
No way.
Yeah.
Serious?
Barclays Center.
Oh, no way.
Oh, snap,
Yeah.
man.
That's great. You know, when you just said DMX, I thought of Barclays Center because the day he died, I was walking past because I live pretty close to it, and I was walking past it, and there were all these people outside on their bikes and stuff, or like I think he was. And it was just that they took over the whole street with all like dogs and stuff. It was like a big like testimonial to him. It was kind of
Memorial,
crazy.
yeah. Unreal.
Memorial, exactly. Yeah. So editor, we can keep this all in. Let's keep the background in for people. Trung, are you still there or have you frozen on us? 1 second. In that case, I'll just maybe we keep this all in just to
close it out.
keep it authentic for
listening.
people. But I do have. Did you see this David Guetta thing with Eminem? Optimize. Here we go. I'm just going to play this for people at home who haven't seen this already.
This is the future rave sound. I'm getting lost in an underground.
Where he does the hand is
This is
so
the
funny.
future rave sound. I'm getting lost in an underground.
It's what a legend.
Yeah, he's a G. Look at that, man. Sick.
Eminem, bro.
Rave sound.
There's something that I made as a joke, and it works so good, I could not believe it. I discovered those websites that are about AI.
Those websites.
Basically, you can write lyrics in the style of any artist you like. So I typed, write a verse in the style of Eminem about future rave. And I went to another AI website that can recreate the voice. I put the text in that and I played the record and people went nuts.
He's a legend.
This
What a
is the
lad.
future.
Anyways,
Mate,
so
unreal.
His reaction,
so
amazing.
good.
I found these AI website. What a legend.
I loved when he said, I went on these websites. I'm like, all right, where's this going here? Because this could end in many different ways. But no, I guess the question is, because, you know, we've talked about this for like video, images. Jack, we talked about you for like images stuff. But like that sounds 100% like Eminem, right? And so the question kind of is, like if you extrapolate this out a few years, like both for actors on TV and for like musicians here, you're pretty much not going to necessarily even need to go to Drake and say drop the 30-second feature, or Rick Ross, whoever's on it, Lil Wayne back in the day. So how do you think it's going to play out? Because that's kind of a crazy like level of creativity that you can tap into there.
Well, boys, this is the checks thesis. I got to get my checks plug in on every
Here we go.
episode.
Yeah.
This
Actually,
idea,
wait, Jack, the rules I have to talk about checks, or Bilal has to talk about checks. Okay, we're doing it. Hey, so thank you, listeners. This episode of Non-Investment Advice is brought to you by Checks.
Checks.art.
Yeah, checks.art.
Belly.ai.
Bilal, did you have any thoughts about checks.art?
Ridiculous. All right. Well, yeah, go on, Jack. Go on.
Wow. Okay. So I was just the plug, this idea of like notability, authorship, like who made what, who owns what, all of these questions that are becoming like, you know, the Tim Urban graphic where it's like you are here and the curve is going vertical. That's like a very, very poignant way to, I think, depict where we are in this whole like the environment of creativity and or like the production of entertainment. It's like the implications are obviously crazy. And you saw underneath his tweet, he said, obviously I'm not going to release this commercially. And it's like, well, you kind of already have, you know what I mean? Like you tweeted about it, you played it in a venue with fucking 100,000 people in there. Like if that's not a commercial exercise, I don't know what is, right? So even all of those lines are
that's
like,
a great point.
I'm not going to put this on iTunes and sell it for 99 cents. But it's probably made David Guetta more relevant in the last couple of weeks than he has been.
Well, we're talking about him, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't know who would Eminem challenge that in the court of law? Like, what would that even look like? What is it that he owns? Like the pitch of the voice that he's using to create it? Everything is a remix of another idea. It's a crazy.
Those guys were chatting.
Once this thing explodes, how many of those things are you going to have to keep up with? It's just like, it's like genie's out of the bottle, boys. I don't know what it means for, you can imagine going on like a Spotify competitor that's just like generating music in real time instead of even like the dynamics shifts from even making it and recording it and putting it out to just generate it in real that It's crazy.
That's that idea about like, it's basically a personalized music is being created as you're listening to it. At the same time, I feel like if that becomes prevalent and the norm, there's always like the anti-trend, and the anti-trend might be we're now all listening to the classics again, Mariah Carey. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think the other question I had was like how Eminem would feel about this. And my opinion is probably most artists, because a lot of them aren't always the first to embrace the new technology, and they would see it as like, oh, well, when, you know, we used to sell CDs, MP3s are coming out, and now like we need to go and sue, you know, Napster or whatever, instead of seeing like, well, we're going to get this out to hundreds of millions of people and we can make money in a concert. And so I think a lot of them would say, well, you can't use my voice without me, which I kind of get. Like I would probably feel the same. What about you, Trung? What do you reckon?
I think we've touched on this in the past, but Fred Wilson from the venture firm USV wrote about this. Exactly what Jack said. There's going to be an explosion of people like me and Bilal making songs about DMX that with his voice, without his permission. Maybe not DMX, but I'll definitely be doing Despacito type songs. He says, what is the yin to AI generated art? What is the yin to that yang? It's crypto. You're fingerprinting what is the original. And it's on the plane. Check the chain. What's the original? Check the chain. Does that make sense, guys? It's like, this is the other world of it, right? What ultimately was Bitcoin? It took digital money and made it scarce, because typically in the digital world, nothing is scarce. Everything's abundant, easily replicable. Bitcoin, as we've talked ad nauseum, is very scarce. There is a certain finite number. And I think that's actually where whoever solves that, that's where the connection is going to be made between crypto and AI, because crypto creates, in theory, scarcity out of digital assets. when Jack said that Tim Urban line, which we should pull up, but it's just an exponential line, just showing literally it's a straight line, goes straight, then right up, right? When there's that amount of creative output, you're gonna have to find a way to find the provenance of the content. And man, like I know the crypto got completely shot on over the past 18 months, and it's the AI summer now. But it's there, man. It's like that's the solution.
AI summer.
It's
AI summer. Yeah. Went from Jesus.
Well, what do you guys think about
you.
that idea, or is that just too much theory? What's the words like? Theory explaining, or just like, oh yeah, you're just trying to connect like these things. Yeah, I'm think boying.
Think boying, man. Yeah.
Does that resonate with you guys? The idea of that if there's all this entertainment abundance that will be unheard of in people's hands. Like even now, like we already do user generated, but this will take it to the millionth degree.
Yeah, 100% correct. Yeah, it's like the long tail hyper. There's like 7 billion perfect echo chambers.
Yeah, and
Crazy.
then there's one way to track it. Check the chain.
I was just going to add, just to move us on real quick, the only DMX song I'm ever going to try to remake is using a sample of, have you ever heard him sing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? Have you guys ever heard this?
Actually, oh my
Legit.
God.
Class.
You would even
What a
say,
legend.
come on, hold up.
Sorry, I mean, I'll stop it now, but man, what an incredible... He made it sound so sick as well. Yeah, no, great question, Trunk. But yeah, I guess, yeah, I don't really have much more to add from what you guys just said there, but yeah, definitely interesting to think about. All right, boys, should we wrap this up with a quick fire one, or how you guys feeling?
Yeah, let's do some rapid fire like we hit Dan with. It'll be a nice way to end this.
I mean, the basic one was the album. We might have done this on another pod, but have you guys got any others instead of the album one? Or we can do an album if you want.
I'll throw this one. I'll do the ones that I probably played the most is All Eyes on Me, Tupac. I remember when that came out.
Oh, there we go.
96.
Tron just getting hyped.
Double disc. Y'all hit when All About You, the number 2 on disc 1 hits.
Whoa, watch out. I asked when your internet went a second ago, I asked Jack, and he was like, man, this is always a hard one. So Jack, is there anything coming to mind for you, mate?
I'm going with a newer one. I'm going to go and Dave.
Oh,
All Alone in
yeah.
This Together. I thought that was a like legit masterpiece. Definitely go listen to that.
That's a sick one, yeah. I'm going to throw, because you're giving the UK some love, I'll give one more. This is not necessarily my favorite album of all time, but it's, like I've already mentioned Illmatic before, like that's a classic. But there's actually a mixtape, which I would kind of count as an album, but it's not really one, called Beats and Bars by Kano. And it's like it's basically like a mixtape where he takes these old beats and he just spits on it.
Class.
And it's so good. I think you can't even get it on Spotify. It's probably on YouTube somewhere. But yeah, that's one that kind of has a lot of childhood memories for me, man. All right, boys, anything else before we log off?
Why don't we do a favorite concert? Let's do the favorite concert.
Well, I'm going to have to think about that one.
I mentioned mine now. I'll just finish it. So before what you guys both think was the Watch the Throne was Jay-Z 2011. Just because
Jack, you went to that one as well.
You saw that one, Jack?
I've seen every single Kanye concert.
Oh, serious?
Amazing.
Wow.
Okay.
That was one I didn't get to, man, and I heard it was the best. Incredible.
Well, I'd love to ask Jack's take on this. That's the only one I went to. I just remember them doing that word in Paris 11 times in a row.
If people just going ham the whole time.
11 times. Literally, there's a YouTube video. It's 48 minutes long. It's just them doing that one song 11 times.
Boys, I don't know if I've ever used this on the pod before, this story, but I went to Miami with the boys I grew up with the week that album came out.
Oh,
mental.
boy.
Wait, Watch the Throne?
Yeah. Just everywhere you went was like that tune on repeat all night.
Just
like they maybe put one breather in and then it'd go back to it. Over and over. It's crazy, man. Great
So
album.
Jack, can you rank Watch the Throne concert versus the other ones, and then your favorite concert you've been to?
Other, as in all time, different ones.
All time, yeah.
It's up there, top 3 probably. And then of his, like Yeezus, that like the stagecraft on that one was ridiculous. Like that was another Barclays Center one. It was just silly, man. Like the production that went into that. And then, you know, another good one I went to, maybe my favorite, was Swedish House Mafia. That was a sick.
Where was that? Was that in a massive venue, or is it like
Barclays Center again?
Oh, damn.
Yeah,
Just like the
you
light,
got Barclays Center on the regular, damn.
yeah, the light show.
Local.
I was like their farewell tour. That was a good time, and a lot of festivals back in the day. You know, yeah, love it, boys. The live music. If you are without responsibilities, get yourself to as much live music as you possibly can.
There you go. That's the advice for the day.
Words of advice, yeah.
Bilal,
I think I went to the Glow in the Dark tour. I'm just looking at the tours. Here, that was 2008. I can't remember, honestly.
In Cardiff.
Oh, you did that in Cardiff? Damn. Yeah, I think mine was in London. I think I was in London somewhere. And I can't honestly remember. I can't place it. I've been to see him like 3-4 times as well. But yeah, the visuals were amazing. But I didn't go to Watch the Throne, and I don't think I saw Yeezus tour, but I saw videos. Is that the one where I think he put it up in Williamsburg, like when he launched the album?
It's like a mountain, and this is where they all had the face masks on.
Yeah. Do you know what? Actually, I did go to that. I did go to that one, actually.
I think Travis Scott opened for him as well.
Damn.
And he was riding on a bird. Like they had this massive mechanical bird it was nuts, man. Oh, I would do one more. Tame Impala I just went to in Nashville. That's nice. Like way out of my, like, I would never book tickets to that, but somebody had a spare ticket and I went. That was class. That's a good example of like, there's like 15-year-old kids going to that and 60-year-olds. It was like a craziest mashup of people I've ever seen at a music concert, but talent.
That's sick. Wait, last one. What was your first concert? Do you guys remember that?
Oh, you're gonna laugh.
Girls.
I do remember my
Backstreet
first
Boys.
concert. I went to see The Game in Montreal. When the game.
Yo, that's your first one. That's incredible. That's legendary, man.
A massive fight broke out. He came 90 minutes late to the stage. A massive fight broke out, and cops like raided the venue. It was like French gangbangers. But that was the first one I went to.
Yes. Montreal popping off. Wait, how old were you, do you think?
No, this is crazy.
Were you a
I didn't go to my
teenager?
first concert until my early 20s. That was it was either 18, 19, or 20. No, 19 or 20
I'm actually
years
same as you. I went when I was like at uni. I was like 18, and it was at Talib Kweli. I remember, which was so
fire, man.
good.
Which was in was it Jazz Cafe in London? Which I don't know if you've been to, either of you, but it's quite a small, intimate venue. Actually, a beautiful place for a concert. And but yeah, it's funny. Talib Kweli I like, but he's not like my top 5 artists, right? But I do. He's kind of independent, so whenever he's in town, I'll go.
Oh, you want to support?
I think I've seen him more times than anyone else. That's kind of the point. But just because he comes all the time, and he'll be a cool small venue. I saw him at SOBs in New York when I first moved there. I think I've seen him in like 3-4 cities. In San Francisco, I saw him once in some forest party thing, which was kind of crazy as well. Anyways, that was probably my first one, which was a bit of a random one. Jack, did you remember yours? Did you just say it? Oh no.
Mine was probably maybe Funeral for a Friend.
Oh, there we go.
Yes, I was in the alternative
Drunk's
rock circles as a young teenager. I'll send you a couple of tracks. I'll send you a couple of tracks, Sean.
Okay.
No, that was my
Aggie teenage years, yeah.
Before I was introduced to
hip hop.
Before Sean
the rich
Paul took
tapestry
over.
of music outside of that. Yeah.
Well, let me. No, I was gonna say, speaking of the non-rich tapestry music, here's another really memorable concert for me. Is I saw the Backstreet Boys in Saigon.
Oh my God!
Think about what I just said.
Sick.
Wow, that is incredible.
The Backstreet Boys
Can you
in
imagine Tron
Saigon.
there?
That's great, man.
That must have been wild, man.
Dude, wild. It's just because like there are no big concerts in Vietnam, so like the locals were very confused about what to do. Like everyone was sitting down in a chair. They didn't know if they're allowed to get up, and like I'm just like 10 drinks deep, just absolutely smashed, losing my mind, and like 99.999% of them, they're just sitting down, just out this outdoor
That's
concert,
incredible.
trying to enjoy themselves. Very confused about what this overseas Vietnamese guy is doing, but man, They got some bangers.
Damn.
Hey,
All
we're
right.
hoping for a Oasis reunion as well.
Oh, serious?
This year or next year, yeah.
That would be sick.
That was another chance. Last ever concert. I saw the last ever Oasis concert before that all went to shit.
No. What? Where was that?
Cardiff.
In the UK.
Yeah.
Cardiff really had some bangers going there. That was on the store.
Millennium
on
Stadium,
the tour.
mate.
Oh, Millennium. I forgot. Yeah, that's a huge stadium. Because Trunk, when Wembley Arena or Wembley Stadium, the home of football, was being rebuilt, everything moved to Cardiff for like a few years. So, and it's a massive, beautiful
that
stadium.
was a massive story when they built that, right? It was crazy.
Yeah, it was beautiful actually.
Man,
yeah.
Cardiff's a good time, man.
What's the capacity? Like massive, like 50, 60,000?
Probably 60, something like that.
Unreal.
Maybe a little less.
Unreal.
Massive, yeah. It's a beautiful stadium. All right, boys, I think that's where we can call it. I hope you guys have made it all the way here. Thanks again for being with us. That was actually one of my favorite episodes in a long time. Dan was sick. He brought the heat.
Dude.
And I think because we talk about culture and music and stuff all the time on here, but we actually got someone who knows what they're talking about, not just us three idiots reading someone's thread and talking about Sean Paul. Yeah.
Fact check on Millennium Stadium is 74,000, boys.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Don't listen to anything we say. Anyway, appreciate you guys being here.
Thanks to our sponsor, Creator Lab. You find that in any of your podcast players. Creator Lab,
That's
Spotify,
true.
Apple Music.
Another episode's went live.
Use code Bilal.
Yeah, exactly. We got our boy Mario Gabriel. Okay, I've recorded with him. That's coming out in 2 weeks.
That's
though.
Gonna
really
be
good
a fire episode. Okay,
that was a good episode.
Dude, definitely check out Creator Lab. You guys do that, and thank you to our sponsors.
Barely.ai /NIA and Jack Butcher's NFTs, which everyone already knows about. So, thanks again for being here. We'll see you guys next week. Cheers. One last thing we want to say. Actually, it's the 100th episode next week. Do we want to say that we might be doing potentially live? Where we need to see if we're committing to it or not. But
let's do it.
we might be doing a live Spaces the next day, right?
Yeah, on the
when
Wednesday.
It goes live on Wednesday,
that,
2 p.m. EST.
Yeah.
We will confirm that.
Get some Q&A from the Telegram.
Q&A, yeah. But it's 100th episode. So Wednesday next week, 2 p.m. EST, we'll do a live on Spaces. But look out in the Telegram group because we'll confirm it there and share the link and all that stuff. But we'll hopefully have some live stuff for you guys there. And we'll see you next week. Cheers.